Guten Tag. Ganz herzlich willkommen. Kann ich Sie schon ein bisschen langsam um Ruhe bitten? Wir wollen einigermaßen pünktlich starten, denn wir haben viele Slides heute. Ein dichtes Programm, ein dichter Vortrag steht bevor. Aber noch ganz kurz, wie immer, die Hinweise noch auf nächste Woche. Wird es dann hier drin ganz anders aussehen. Wir werden eine Ausstellung eröffnen, Klangwelten, über 20 Aussteller von akustischen Materialien und Systemen werden ihre Produkte hierher bringen und die ganze Ausstellung, die bis im Februar dauert, werden wir mit einem Referat eröffnen, nämlich von Spielmann-Exler, Architekten Harald Exler wird hier sein und auch die Akustiker vom Müller BBM, die das Projekt der Tonhalle Mark gemacht haben. Karl-Heinz Müller, sicher einer der wichtigsten, bedeutendsten Akustiker weltweit, der wird auch an dem Abend hier sein. Das ist am nächsten Donnerstag am Abend um 18 Uhr. Können Sie sich gerne anmelden. Die ganze Ausstellung wird von 3 Referaten begleitet. Der zweite Anlass wird dann am Mittwoch, ausnahmsweise am Mittwoch, 13. Dezember stattfinden. Dann haben wir Kurt Eckenschwiler und den Klangkünstler Andres Bosshardt bei uns. Da geht es so um so den Clash zwischen der physikalischen Messung und auch der sinnlichen Empfindung von Akustik. Andres Bosshardt wird auch so eine Klangmaschine mitbringen, also das verspricht ein wunderbar interessanter Abend zu werden, den wir dann auch noch mit Glühwein abschließen werden, also ein bisschen unser Weihnachtsanlass, zu dem Sie auch ganz herzlich eingeladen sind. So now I switch to English because our guests, they will talk in English today, and our guests are from VELUX, well, at least Lone Pfeiffer is from VELUX, and Kasper Guldager Jensen from 3XN Architects. They will talk about the about the modular skylight from VELUX, which is a new product from VELUX. It's not just a new product, it's really a whole new system, a whole new business field for VELUX. They will, with this product, they really enter this new field with big scale rooftop lighting, and well, they promise that this product can solve all these problems that you might have when you plan a rooftop lighting with the shading, with the motorization that you don't want to see, and with the ventilation that is linked to the rooftop lightnings and fire smoke exhaust. So this is really a system that solves a lot of problems, and it was developed not just by VELUX. They worked together with a partner, and this partner wasn't just anybody, it was Foster Partners from London, and it was done several years ago, 5-6 years ago, and it was on the market in Denmark for, I don't know, 5 years, and one of the first products, first project where it was used was the greenhouse, a project which is by 3XN Architects, very famous and really successful office from Denmark, and we are really pleased to welcome Kasper Guldager. Thank you that you are coming today to present this project, which is a hotel transformation into a convention center, and when it's called Green Solution House, and they took the issue of the sustainability really seriously. So he will present us the whole idea and all these measures, how they made this project really sustainable. And one of the measures was to use this VELUX Modular Skylight. So first we really want to welcome Lone Pfeiffer. She's architect at the headquarters from VELUX. And she is responsible for the sustainable section at VELUX. Maybe you can explain us better what this really means. So please give a warm welcome to Lone. Thank you.
Vielen Dank und Mahlzeit an alle. Grüßt Sie zusammen. Das war's wegen dem deutschen Thema. Ich werde ins Englische wechseln, damit wir auf die gleiche Sprache vorstellen und wie auch besprochen. Thank you very much for the invitation to speak today, and thank you for coming. It's a pleasure to be in Switzerland, actually always, but it's a particular pleasure to be able to talk about an introduction to the topic of Green Solution House, which is a project that Kasper and I have worked on since 2011. I am architect of education, specialized in sustainability. And I happen to be director for sustainability and architecture at the VELUX Group. So there is a good match between these fields, and I'm running the Active House Alliance. I'm leading that on a daily basis. I'll come back to what we mean with that. First of all, to the VELUX vision, it is probably known to you. We have a vision that we would like to introduce as much daylight and fresh air through the roof. That is our business. And we would also like to be assessed by our customers as the best in class. Well, that's you also. So this is what we aim for. We have been working with that since 1941, when our founder, the engineer, Willem Ken Rasmussen, he started VELUX. It was during the Second World War. There was scarcity of square meters. There was scarcity of building materials during the World War. And he enabled, via a roof window or a skylight it was at the point, he actually started inventing a skylight in 1941, which was making possible that a school could make a classroom in the attic. So that is how it all began 76 years ago, and we are still true to this vision, and we believe very fondly in it. The same founder of VELUX, Willem Ken Rasmussen, said 3 years later, he said, "One experiment is better than 1,000 expert views." And this is hanging on a metal board in our workshop, and it is actually graved in granite when we exit the headquarters also, and it's hanging in a lot of our factories. It's very profoundly the approach to how we deal with experimentation, new products, new challenges. So it is, in a way, I think it has become our innovation philosophy. I'm not saying it has been strategically thought out as that. I would rather say that it's something that we have now started to understand ourselves, that this is how we actually innovate forwards. You mainly understand backwards, but you live your life forwards. We base the approach to sustainability on the Active House principles. It's quite simple. It's not in the near of LEED or BREEAM or DGNB. It's a very simple but still holistic approach to have energy, to have environment, and to have comfort, and to have them treated in one. This has led us, in a way, to how we can work with buildings, because our business is buildings. But the key of it is what goes on inside buildings, because that is where we are. We spend 90% of our times either living or working or playing. So this is what we find in particular interesting. And our approach is not only related to a typical winter situation. It's not only related to the heating season, we don't actually prefer to be judged as a building component only by the ability or speed with which the heat loss transmits through our product. We think there are a lot more to talk about in buildings than only the heating season and only the U value. we would like to talk about the whole year, and we'd like to talk about all the parameters that are important. Also because we have seen in the later years that a singular focus on heating energy may lead to some summer situations where you actually end up having to cool or air condition the buildings because it gets too hot. So it's necessary that we have this holistic approach towards the whole building. The active house principles, here, again, the very simple and probably too banal approach to explaining it to you because you are all professionals, but I'm a strong believer that if you have to explain something, you have to be able to explain it shortly and also to your grandmother. So I will pretend for a minute to be explaining it to my grandmother. I usually say that energy and environment is a hygiene aspect of any building. You have to consider the energy, you have to consider the environment. You cannot make a building that spends a lot of energy, nor can you make a building which is leading to a too large footprint. But the comfort parameters, as we interpret them, which is daylight, thermal comfort, and air quality, is what matters to us. If the energy is the one leg and the environment is the other, then we have our vision, the daylight, the senses, the thermal comfort, and the air quality is what's important for the 15 kilos of air that we all breathe every day. We are very preoccupied with what we eat, food, how we exercise, fitness. Maybe we are not so aware of the status of the indoor climate and the quality of the air, where we actually spend 90% of our times. And that is basically what we aim at in the Active House Alliance and principles. We have done a number of demonstration projects to test this in new, old, renovation, offices, kindergarten, education institutions in 12 countries around the world. And that has led us to launching a label last year, which is now possible to take out on a building through professional verifiers. But again, back to the innovation by experiment, which is also what led to why we are here today. The VELUX Modular Skylight, the architect in the middle is Brent Møller, my colleague, and then it is two colleagues from Foster & Partners, Paul Kalkofen on the left. Brent, who has been in the VELUX group for 34 years, he is an architect, an industrial designer, and he has actually more patents now in his name than our founder. So I would say he is the VELUX inventor. And from time to time, he comes up with some really good ideas. But one thing is the idea, the other thing is to make it happen. And sometime, maybe 10 years ago, Brent told me that he had an idea for making a skylight, maybe a new direction also for VELUX. He also knew that we needed somebody who are in this business already, because we are not, or were not at the time, in the residential business. So he happened to know Norman Foster, because he was in a company before that were doing shading, architectural shading, Anderson, maybe you know them. And from that he knew Norman Foster. I think he mounted the curtains in Norman Foster's weekend house here in Switzerland, actually. The one in the wooden ellipse. So he actually grabbed the phone and called up Foster & Partners and said, would you like to look into this with us? Could we maybe test something out? And there wasn't a fixed plan. It was not like a business plan at the time. But they looked into it, and it was a great success. Oh, what happened? Oh, some update. Sometimes I would also like to have one of those updates. Anyway, they looked into how can we do that and how can we do it in a contemporary approach. What are the technologies today which will enable that we can actually bring something completely new to the market? And they looked into a new technology of making profiles. It's called pultrusion. Maybe some of you know it. when we get back to the PowerPoint, you can see it looks like it's glass fibers, looks a little bit like hair before you pultrude it, and you are able to make it into a profile, which is very, very strong. It has very good static abilities, and also it has some excellent thermal abilities. Here it is being tested in our test center, which is the largest in Northern Europe, and they are putting up the wind speed more and more. It is very thoroughly tested. You can see the profile here. This is what they developed. It's fairly high as a profile, but they're also very slim. And for those of you looking very closely, you can see you cannot see the difference if the profile is openable or not. Something which our sister company, Velfak, has had a lot of success with in their facade windows. I know that's also known to some of you. And from there, they developed a lot of different systems for making glass roof or skylight applications. And this has resulted in the many, many systems which are available today. I have a number of colleagues who are experts in this also and can tell you about the Swiss applications. And talking about installation, that was a major focus because Foster & Partners said, we can go and buy the theoretically best possible product on the market, but it's in the installation. It is either something that has to be handmade and fitted on site. So they wanted something that was as close to off-site construction as you can get. And this is where the VELUX approach comes in, because we started as a modular approach, and we have, so to say, defined the standards for classical roof windows in the roof. And with this approach, we approach the skylight. It's a modular format, and it's very easy to mount very quickly. And you have the house, you have the building closed very, very quickly. And it is a very secure and tight way of mounting it. It has been on the market since the launch in the Gherkin in London, 2012, a bit longer in Denmark, so we have a lot of cases, and it is definitely the architect's darling as a product. And there's some examples here, C.F. Møller. This is the Experimentarium by Art Architects in Copenhagen. Do stop by if you have a chance. I know a lot of you like copper, and there is a double copper spiral staircase there. Here is from Holland, and a case from Sweden. So we have, as I said, a lot of colleagues who are able to tell you a lot more. There are a lot of examples in the brochures where you can see where it has been applied. But I would also like to just raise a flag for the sustainable approach to buildings and point out this Gutes Wohnen in der Schweiz. This is part of what we do in sustainability. We go and ask people about their relation to buildings, their attitudinal approach. And my architect colleague, Christine Dietrich, is the expert. She's down at the back waving. Yeah, you can't see it here. She's an expert in that. So, Kasper, over to you.
And thank you for coming for this brown bag session. I think it's kind of a lunch and learn. So you have lunch, and I'll try to keep the time within a lunch break. But happy to be here. Also happy to be here with Lona. She's been my partner in crime since 2003, when I, as a student, made a huge event called Sustainable Living. And I guess that is what I'm driven by in architecture. How can we push the boundaries for sustainability in the work we do? I'm from 3XN Architects, but also I'm going to spend a lot of time on explaining the GXN innovation. So we actually have two companies. We are 4 people who are the owner partners, and my daily responsibility is to keep track of our innovation business. And this is our office in Copenhagen, where under the same roof we both do research and we do project design and we do competitions. So it's quite integral. Just in short, we are not a big office. We can't get much bigger. I mean, our limit right now is 120, and that's what we are in physically. But now we're also expanding in some offices in Stockholm and in Sydney and in New York. So it also means that we work 50% in our home market and 50% internationally. If you do not know, we also have a big project coming up in Lucerne, the headquarters for the IOC. And I think a lot of the principles I will talk about today goes throughout all our work. But I'll try to talk a bit about some smaller projects, and they also often tend to be more fun. So first example here is a tiny building we did for a headquarter of a local bank in Denmark. And in all our work, we like to push also the aesthetics and the design, and we want to deliver what we promise. But in this case, there's a building that's very characterized by the roof. It's also a modular skylight. This is, however, custom tailored, but it's giving kind of a signature to the roofscape of the building. But what's more important is how we then define the whole building, that we have access to a beautiful view of the water, but how can we optimize that? Then we are kind of triggering the geometry of the building to actually create a large surface that can view the water. And also within the geometry of the building, we shield from the overheating of the building to give it a great, you can say, like energy performance, but also framing the view to the ocean and creating a lot of daylit workspace. We like this roof so much that we also collaborated on making some integral art pieces of this. I don't know, it didn't show. Yeah, here's some. That we actually made these kind of 8-meter deep dwells in the ceiling, from the ceiling and into the floor. So when you walk on the floor, you actually get like this mirror reflection of the roofscape. So it also becomes this kind of artwork created with the daylight and with the geometry of the building. But in this talk, I'm more focusing on what are the, you know, like the qualities of the life inside the building. And I think if we kind of remove the roof, you also see that the whole building is built around kind of a terraced way to create an open space. And we believe that architecture can stimulate the way you work, the way you communicate, for example, the way kids learn, or you can stimulate curiosity. We're really excited about how can we, as architects, understand space and the behavior in the space. And this was very much about breaking down a large space into smaller divisions. So the people working there actually were dimensioned to the ideal group sizes, but also you use the movement to have people meet, and the staircases as kind of social furnitures. And the lower level in this bank was kind of a public space to the city. So that's where the city invited the people of the, or the bank invited the people of the city in to have concerts and Christmas tree parties, etc. And what's also interesting is that then we deliver the project, but we also go back and we have been monitoring this building intensely for 3 years, like what works and also what does not work, what can be optimized. So I think that's a key learning, that we are not just object makers, but we also want to have like a longer relationship to the people that we are working as architects for, understanding the building. This is a good example because the last 3 years it's been the best workspace in Denmark, and I think this year it's been rated as I think the second best workspace in Europe. But you can see how these things work, and also how we then try to learn from it. One example was that actually this kind of visual accessibility, and you can see where people are. The thing that disturbed the people the most were like when you can't detect the noise. So we had to like rework the acoustics in order to create comfort for the acoustics and the privacy of people. So this is also what we do. This is one from my team in GXN. She's a psychologist, and she's out interviewing the people from most of our buildings to find out how can we then learn from that. So in GXN we are a lot smaller. I think currently we are 16 people. And it's a mix of architects and engineers and parametric designers, the psychologist and an anthropologist. But the whole idea is that we want to establish a space in the office where we can invite in for collaborations. We've been collaborating with VELUX. We're also ongoingly working with material scientists or software developers or artists. And we then fund all these activities through European grants or national grants or commercial partners or university partners. So it's becoming this kind of, you can say like a test space within the office, because you can't just take untried materials in on a commercial ongoing project. So we're trying to like test and develop and document new innovations before we then can implement it in the ongoing work of the office. So this is another from my team. He's called Ken. He said like, well, in 3X, and that's just how we do it. We have a concept, we make a building. It's straight, no deviations. I mean, this is a very easy way to communicate it. But this is how he sees working in GX. And I mean, we never have the answer, and we always are exploring, detouring, finding out more than one solution. So I think the idea is that it's combining, you know, like a trimmed professional architectural practice with a I wouldn't say untrimmed, unprofessional, but with a question-driven, explorative approach, and that is what allows us to bring new ideas to our buildings. I have two chapters. One is circular design, and I think that's more or less what we've been doing for 10 years. The other chapter is behavior design, and I think that's what we'll be doing for the next 10 years. So, circular design and sustainability. To me, I had many years where sustainability were equaling energy performance, and sustainability were about addressing the problems in the building industry. We use too much energy, we produce too much waste, the CO2 footprint has to be smaller. But then if you think about nature and nature's ecosystems, everything is in circles there, how all resources can be used for new things. For example, the amounts of ants in kilos are bigger than the amount of people in kilos. So the body mass of ants in nature is bigger than people. And they don't produce any waste. So waste as such is not something that exists in nature. So how can we learn from nature to make circular sustainability? How can sustainability be positive? How can we eliminate waste? How can we produce energy? How can we clean the air? How can we reuse the water? And that is what circular sustainability is about. And also with the Green Solution House, we found a client that wanted to make sustainability into an attraction. So this is a small project. It sits on an island in Denmark where you need to travel to get to. So the idea from the client and the business case was that in order to attract, you know, like conference tourism, she needed to make sustainability into an attraction. Just like you can say with a Michelin restaurant that you want to travel to get there. And it's also about saying, well, we need to think holistically. So it's not a matter of like a certification religion. So we actually develop it towards the DGNB, towards cradle to cradle, and toward the active house that Lone was mentioning. And it's also more than a building, it's actually a living demonstratorium. So the whole idea is that we are ongoingly testing out new building materials, new way to produce energy, new way to improve the indoor climate. And in order to do that, we needed to not just sit down as architects and design and find all the solutions. It was very much an inclusive process. We mapped out all the stakeholders, starting with the neighbors, going on to the, you know, like water utility, to the energy facilitation of the island, and ask what can this building do to improve the situation locally and on the island as such. It was focusing on people. I think when you talk about sustainability, you often start being very technical, and you need to solve things technically, but you need to start saying like, so what does it mean for the people? And in this case, also, how do you experience it? How can you see the sustainability layers in the building? And we worked in partnerships, locally, but also in big partnerships like with VELUX. So from the like small granite wreck to big partners like Saint-Gobain and VELUX. So here's the idea for, this is a client, it was the opening day, so she was happy. And she also made a kind of a business model. So all the revenue, like the money earned, she will reinvest into new solutions. And the last experiment was some like daylight experimentation with Oxford University. So this is kind of ongoing. So as said, the building is really small. And you see like 2 existing on the right and left hotels that got renovated. And then we squeezed in this kind of fan-shaped conference room in the middle. In total, there are 75 solutions. I'll just mention a few of them. But just going back to the point that you need to be able to explore the things that creates value for you as people. And when you're there, it's very much, it's on an island, it's beautiful. It's about the light, it's about the air, it's about the nature. And also it's about the rhythm of the day and the seasons. So this is actually what's really present when you're there, the light, the air, and the nature. But we also had the building to take down, and we reused all the materials. So we said, like, we need to make this kind of cycle ecosystem on the site. We can take the old glass and foam it up to new insulation. We also took trips to the neighbors and said, like, this is a granite wreck. Denmark is super flat. I mean, and this island is the only island in Denmark where we can get access to stone. So we were super excited, and also the byproduct of cutting a stone is the dust from that cutting. So we took all that dust and we took the building waste that was produced when we tore down the buildings, and we created what we called a bitumen-free landscape. So we didn't want any asphalt, any oil in our building materials, and we wanted all the soil to be able to accept the water and use the water positively. So this kind of water and soil balance. So besides being a building project, it was also a landscape project with some brilliant landscape architects called SLA, and making these seasonal lakes and making a full balance of the water could be treated on site, but we also made the geography so we could invite the water when there were heavy rains from the neighbors. So we were making something positive beyond the border of our site. So outside was one concept, and we also needed to bring the water treatment inside. So, I mean, the whole process was about establishing these kind of cycles, life cycle design. And you could say inside, we were working with this called living machines. So we actually visually put up these algae tubes so we could recycle the water, having the microbes of the algae cleaning gray and black water, having the plants outside be this kind of earth lung, so they could actually take all the kind of the scent out of it. And creating green walls, having, of course, like sanitary that you could recycle the water. And the whole idea is that we have like a dialogue between the landscape and the building, and the water can be used and recycled. And again, we needed to do the same for all the materials. So we asked all our partners, like, we want things to be designed for disassembly. So we are very careful when we build it, but we are very uncareful when we take apart. So we need to see our buildings as material banks that you are able to like take apart and reuse, so you eliminate waste. And this is actually Velfag, the sister company of VELUX that Lone mentioned, that after this project, they actually have documented that they can recycle 93% of all the materials. And this has kind of started to change, at least in Denmark, in the sustainability agenda there, that we think about how can we take buildings apart, how can we reuse materials positively. Inside, I mean, in the hotel rooms, we wanted to make what we call smart rooms, or focus on the air. As Lone said, it's worth a thought to think about that you actually are inhaling, exhaling 15 kilos of air per day, and you're just eating 1 kilo of food. So what if we can like provide the best air quality possible? So we did that in what we developed, like material filters, material passports. So when we tendered the materials, we made sure down to the chemical level that this was healthy. This had actually positive effects. We chose paints that were breaking down formaldehyde. We used surfaces free of toxin. We bought carpets that were actually capturing dust particles of a size you don't want to have in your lung, that you then remove when you vacuum this. And in order for the guests to understand this, we developed these tablets together with Autodesk Research on how can you document the indoor environment, focusing on energy, light, air, and water. So, I mean, you check in, and you don't see all this. This is kind of technical sensors that is not visible, but makes the room intelligent. And makes it possible for you as a guest to see, like, what is my consumption, what is production on site, and what ecosystem am I part of? And you can also not use the tablet if you just want to have a normal stay. But the idea is to like make this visible and enable people. We also thought about, like, well, the energy. How can we work with that? I guess you saw also there was some of the skylights with PVs in them. We had like a lot of different like photovoltaic and photothermal. So just taking the heat out of the sun, kind of an electricity and heat cycle. But we also wanted to make a biological cycle. How can we take the waste for the food and biological waste? So we took and designed the kitchen so we could take all the biomass out, but also talk to the neighbors and a hospital on the island on how can we take all your biological leftovers from your kitchens. And we make energy from that, not by burning it, but by heating it up so we can take out the electricity and the heat. But as a byproduct, we get biochar. So actually, we don't put carbon dioxide particles in the air. We just keep them as fertilizer for the soil and the kitchen gardens. So we try to like reinvent how we see energy and how we can then, with that fertilized soil, make new vegetables that can serve in the restaurant. And just, I think this is the last slide on this project, but just thinking about how we can integrate an idea of circular sustainability. So the last chapter is behavior design. And popular speaking, I'm saying that's from this year and 10 years ahead. We've been very focusing on the materials, on the ecosystem design. Now it's time to learn a bit about what drives value creation in architecture. And these are like reports that we are super interested in, and some of the interesting findings is that like buildings can improve overall productivity and performance by as much as 12.5%. I mean, in total, there's a 30% swing between good buildings and bad buildings in the way they perform. So we think it's about behavior costs. This is our office annual breakdown. We spend 1% on the energy. We spend 9% on the rent, but 90% on the people, the staff, all the architects, front office and all that. So I mean, if we want to do something that is value creating, we need to like make the space works as good as possible for the people in it. So I mean, this is design. I guess how many of you know design? Then I can see how many architects are here. Because design is like, this is the website where you want to find the latest cool designed whatever. And when you then type in office, this is just like a screen dump from the search of offices. No people. I mean, and we have been bad at this at 3XN as well. So we like to see architecture without people. We just like the image, and then we're off for the next building. So I mean, so if you start to think about who are really talking about this, I mean, I was very inspired reading the Steve Jobs biography, and it's like when we are doing this, I mean, if a building doesn't encourage collaboration, use a lot of innovation and the magic that's sparked by serendipity. So they design buildings to make people get out of their offices and mingle, and in that way, kind of be creative and innovative. Then I then Googled the building he was talking about. And I don't think it was that kind of magical as he mentioned it. So I think it's also, you know, like important to think about what is your intention and what is the reality. So we need to think about it, but also document it and learn from the work we do. So we believe that architecture shapes behavior, and we also think, obviously, that behavior shapes architecture. So we have put down a research cluster of 7 people that for 5 years will like find out what can we learn from business science, from social science, from different sciences and evidence found in research, and how can we relate it to business value, social comfort, and interaction design. So this is our next book coming out, I think, in December. And this is about everyday life in the built environment, how we learned from the buildings that we documented. So we put out this theory called social affordances, that it's about understanding the people, the culture of the organization and the country, and it's about seeing what can the space do to support this social synergy. So we started to look at our buildings as these kind of social furnitures, and this is a good example on a building in Norway that is it's more becoming a part in the city that connects like a residential area with the city center, and we do that by making all these staircases, and also this city every summer kind of explodes into the most popular jazz festival in Europe. So it's about saying this is connecting different levels of the city, but also to create all these possibilities for people to sit and view and enjoy the different performances and connect the city. So again, it's about like staging these moments and having the behavior in focus when we design. So I think the last project is what actually were the defining project for us in understanding the effect people have on the architecture they're surrounded by. So this is a central staircase in a high school in Denmark where we won a competition, and a brief from the government of education were, how can we make a school where the students are learning not just from the teachers, but also between each other and between the different topics. How can math stimulate biography, etc. So we made this out of these design principles that we wanted to have open space, we wanted to have shared space, but also varied spaces. It's not just to have like one big open space, it's about having a whole like variation of different spaces. So actually we took away all corridors and made one big open connected space, but then made a lot of different spatial variations. And also this visual transparency allows you to actually sit on the 5th floor and see on the lower floor how you can do gym, etc. It's about focusing on comfort. It's about also making invitations in the architecture, invite people to use the staircase, for example, and also about to stimulate people with the materials that you choose. I think that's super exciting to be here today and see that you have this fantastic material lab that you can access. So again, you see how the students actually are using this space. There are areas where you can go in and do some more like introvert, concentrated type of studying, and in that way the students are seeking and controlling their learning environment themselves. And it's about creating overlapping, connecting, and adaptable spaces. So you can see how also this building kind of changes, and also how it's used as how you would study at home. I think this is super important, and for us was a defining moment in actually understanding what value we can create with the buildings that we propose. And I think a lot of these things you can actually find in the IOC headquarters, even those two buildings are so different. And we go back and document. I mean, one interesting, we had this idea about that you stop up on the staircase and start engaging conversations, and we were like giving the staircase a very wide profile. But we found out that it's actually in that landing that people stop and meet each other. So now we are very concerned about these areas of our buildings and finding out how can we optimize the meeting potentials. So the last slides are a last research project, and together with VELUX we have started a journey on healthy buildings that promote the well-being of people. And this comes from some other documented research that, again, over a 30 years period of time, the building cost actually gets really small. It's only 2% of the cost that you normally have your full focus on. So if you start to see how can buildings affect behavior, you can actually start to make an impact, and you can argue for the choices you do as an architect. So we are working with the Active House Alliance because they, as one of 3 rating systems internationally, have this focus on comfort. There's an active house, there's a well, and there's the living building challenge. So again, I mean, we spend 90% of our time indoor, half of our time on work indoor. So we need to affect that. This is actually how it's measured. This is green solution house, you would say, before the renovation. This is kind of a comfort compass. So the bigger the imprint, the better the comfort. And the comfort is up here. So see, like after the renovation, we actually maxed out on a lot of the comfort parameters. So you can use it as a tool. But also we want to not just predict it, we also want to measure it. So living measurements, it's about this initiative together with the Leapcraft, some software and hardware developers, that we actually are starting to measure the ongoing indoor climate at Green Solution House. So we have these displays, and measuring CO2, humidity, daylight, temperature, and acoustics, and actually learning from it, how can the building become more intelligent? And I think that's interesting how you can start to learn from buildings, but also make buildings that are more dynamic and not static. So I think one of the key takeaways is going from buildings as a product to see buildings as a service or as a lifelong relationship. And the few last slides is just from the foyer. We had a fantastic photographer who he spent the whole day there, so it has a lot of daylight in the day and it has a lot of moonlight at night. But the one thing I just want to kind of hammer in is that we believe that architecture shapes behavior. And by focusing on the people and on the comfort, I think we'll start to talk about prioritizing qualities that are the most value-creating that we can do as architects. So this is why I'm glad to be here, Lone, with you. We did the Green Solution House, and we're doing the ongoing monitoring of live buildings and start to see building not being static, but do it in a dynamic way. So that's super interesting. Thank you very much.
Yeah, dear Lone, Pfeiffer, Kasper Guldager, it was really an extreme pleasure having you here today. Thanks so much for this refreshing and inspiring inputs when we look a little bit across the border. It's always a thing we should do more in here at the Schweizer Baumuster-Centrale. It should be like European Baumuster-Centrale. I think you should have a look at the mock-up where you really can see the VELUX Modular Skylight. If you don't have the time now, the mock-up will remain here because VELUX is one of our exhibitors. And last but not least, I really want to thank you, the VELUX company. They are a main sponsor of the Baumuster-Centrale. Felix Ecker is the Verwaltungsratspräsident. He is always a really good partner that we can rely on. He makes a lot of these things possible. Thank you so much and have a good afternoon. Bye.